One confession shattered decades of silence. At 62, Julian Lennon stunned the world with just a few words. "I hated her. Absolutely hated her." But this is only the tip of the iceberg. Behind these words lies a story so dark that even the boldest biographers feared to tell it. What if I told you that the son of the most peaceful man on the planet grew up in an atmosphere so toxic that he contemplated revenge? What if the legend of love and peace was built on the bones of a destroyed family? The story behind these words is dirty, painful, and full of secrets that fans never expected to see. Imagine this: a child whose surname opens any door, but who can't get even a phone call from his own father. A boy who learns about his father's death from the news, not from family. A son who was erased from the will as if he never existed. This is a story about family, betrayal, fame, and survival, one that makes you question everything you thought about rock royalty. What could make the son of a legendary musician carry a grudge his entire life? What words were so cruel that they echoed for decades? Today, you'll discover a side of Julian Lennon that no tabloid could ever print, the truth he kept buried until now. And this truth will change everything you knew about the most famous family in rock history. Long before he became the son the world pitied, Julian Lennon was just a boy living in the shadow of greatness, craving something ordinary. But what if I told you his childhood was a nightmare disguised as a fairy tale? His childhood looked glamorous from the outside, all because of the famous surname. Paparazzi followed him to school, fans screamed his name on the street, teachers treated him like a celebrity. But inside the Lennon house, happiness was a stranger. Where there should have been family bliss, cold silence and emotional emptiness reigned. The day John Lennon left, he left for someone new, abandoning Julian and his mother. And here's what's shocking: he didn't just leave, he vanished, as if he dissolved into thin air. No explanations to a 5-year-old boy, no promises to return. Julian lost not just a father, he lost his sense of security, his faith that adults tell the truth. Picture this: a child waiting for his father every evening, pressing his nose to the window, hoping to see a familiar figure. But instead came only bills his mother couldn't pay, and silence that became deafening. Cynthia was on the edge, working hard, selling family treasures just to keep food on the table. You can't live that fairy tale life forever. Gold records on the walls couldn't warm the house when the heating was cut off. Photos with the Beatles couldn't pay for school uniforms. While people imagined mansions and endless luxury, the reality was a cold apartment, second-hand clothes, and uncertainty. And the cruelest part? Julian had to smile and pretend everything was wonderful because he was a Beatles' son. Fame brought no comfort, only questions he couldn't answer. At school, Julian became a target not only for the envious, but also for those who wanted to use his name. Children saw the surname, thought he had everything, but he felt empty, isolated. But here's what truly breaks the heart. They teased him not only for wealth he didn't have, but for a father he didn't know. "Where's your dad?" they shouted. "Why did he abandon you?" These words cut deeper than any physical blows. Teachers rarely helped, assuming he was too privileged to need protection. It's hard. It's hard for a child who already feels invisible in his own family. His mother was his only shield, but even she couldn't protect him from the most painful truth. Growing up, Julian was haunted by the image of a father celebrated for peace and love that the son never had. While the world worshipped John Lennon, Julian saw only absence, broken promises, and a man he barely knew. And here's where the story gets truly dark. Even more painful was watching his father shower love on Sean Lennon, his younger half-brother. Headlines called John a devoted parent. But for Julian, this wasn't just hypocrisy, it was betrayal at the deepest level. People heard John's music and thought of hope, unity, but Julian felt only rejection, anger. Every song about love sounded like mockery of his own experience. Every interview where John spoke about family values was a knife to the heart. There were whispers, rumors about Julian's birth that leaked to the press. John allegedly called him a mistake, the result of momentary weakness. While Sean was born from love, planned and wanted, Julian was a reminder of a past they wanted to erase. Even if these words were exaggerated by the tabloids, the wounds were deep, reminding Julian every day that he was different, unwanted. Cynthia tried to fill the gap, but how can you replace a father who became a symbol of an entire generation? Julian's relationship with his father was always strained, but what happened next exceeded all expectations. After the divorce, contact became not just rare, it became torturous. Imagine forced phone calls once every few months, where the father speaks as if to a stranger. Occasional awkward meetings turned into photo shoots for the press, where Julian had to play the happy son. But nothing real, nothing healing happened. John poured his love onto Sean, making sure the world saw him as a caring father. But for Julian, there was no such effort. He watched from afar, reading in newspapers about how John taught Sean to play piano, how they baked bread together, how they spent time in the studio. Julian wanted to believe he mattered, but always felt like an outsider in his own family. Moments of hope flickered and died with cruel regularity. A guitar for his birthday that John sent through an assistant, a kind word in an interview where he briefly mentioned his older son. And then, nothing again. Years passed in silence, broken only by tabloid rumors. Julian craved a real connection, paternal guidance, but these hopes always crashed against reality. The feeling of rejection, injustice, it all became too much. He stopped expecting anything from John. The father he needed would never return. But then something unexpected happened. A few days before the tragedy, John called. Not through an assistant, not through Yoko, himself. His voice sounded different, warmer, as if he finally understood what he had lost. They talked about music, about the future, about the possibility of meeting. For the first time in years, Julian felt that his father was really listening to him, seeing in him not a mistake from the past, but a son with a future. This hope was torn away in an instant when news of John Lennon's death swept the globe. The world mourned a hero, but Julian's grief was different, quieter, heavier. He was just a boy in a small town, cut off from the headlines and hysteria. No one called to tell him the news. He learned of his father's death from television, like millions of other people. Shock, loss, it was overwhelming. No funeral, no goodbyes. Yoko Ono announced there would be no public mourning, only a call to honor John's dreams of peace. But for Julian, this was the final humiliation. He was denied even the right to say goodbye to his father. Julian was left alone with his memories and regrets. The last words he heard from his father echoed in his mind, not because they were profound, but they marked the end of any chance for healing. The rest of the world cried for a legend, but Julian cried for a father he never really had. But the real betrayal was yet to come. The reading of the will became the moment that forever changed Julian's life. John Lennon left almost everything to Yoko Ono, ignoring almost the existence of his older son. All those years of wanting paternal approval ended with a legal document that confirmed his worst fears. But here's what's truly shocking. The will wasn't just about unequal distribution of money. There were lines that sounded like a final blow to Julian's self-esteem. Wording that made him not an heir, but a recipient of charity from his father's estate. Yoko controlled not only the money, she controlled the music, the legacy, the very memory of John Lennon. Julian was given a small trust fund, like a handout to keep him from making trouble. It wasn't just about money. It was about being erased from his father's history, turned into an inconvenient footnote. For Julian, the fight became about recognition, identity, belonging. He began an exhausting legal battle, years of negotiations, headlines, sleepless nights. People misunderstood his motives, calling him greedy. But for Julian, it was a matter of pride, reclaiming part of his story. The press portrayed him as a greedy son wanting to profit from his father's death. But the truth was much more complex. Every day in court was a reminder of how little he meant to the man the whole world considered a symbol of love. The final settlement was reportedly large, but no amount could heal the wounds left by years of estrangement. Money couldn't bring back childhood, couldn't erase memories of feeling invisible in his own family. While the legal battle raged, so did a quiet war with Yoko Ono. She was always there, the gatekeeper of his father's memory, the person who changed everything. In Julian's eyes, she was the one who destroyed his family, stole his father, and now controlled even his death. Public appearances weren't just awkward, they were full of poison. Forced smiles hid looks full of mutual dislike. For almost 2 decades, every negotiation session, every event reminded Julian that she held all the power. He resented her, blamed her for most of his pain. In his eyes, she wasn't a stepmother. She was a usurper who seized the throne that belonged to his mother. Every decision about John's legacy was made without his input. Every project implemented without his consent. But what if I told you that behind this hatred lay something deeper? That Julian saw in Yoko not just the woman who broke up the Beatles, but a symbol of everything he had lost. She was a living reminder that his father chose a new family over the old one. Life has a way of pushing toward change through the most unexpected paths. Anger brought no peace, only pain and a huge hole inside. Over time, some moments healed this pain. A photo exhibition where Yoko unexpectedly supported his work, a chance meeting where they spoke as people, not enemies. But most important was the need to keep peace for Sean's sake. Julian realized his younger brother had become a hostage to their adult war. Sean loved them both and suffered from their conflict more than anyone. Through it all, Julian's relationship with Sean became the anchor that kept him from drifting too far into bitterness. They grew up in different worlds, one in the luxury of the Dakota, the other in a modest apartment in England. But the pain of losing their father was their common language. For a long time, distance and jealousy kept them apart. Julian saw in Sean everything he himself was denied: paternal love, recognition, a place in the Beatles' legacy. But when they finally met as adults, something unexpected happened. Sean wasn't the spoiled prince Julian had imagined. He too carried the burden of the famous surname, also struggled with expectations, also sought his own identity in the shadow of a giant legend. Shared experience, mutual understanding, and the desire for connection brought them together. Sean's kindness and acceptance made Julian see the cost of hatred. Moments together, watching old footage, sharing music, laughing over childhood memories, helped Julian heal from wounds he had carried for decades. For the first time, he felt he belonged not just to a name, but to a family. A real family, where he was loved not for his surname, but for who he was. The quiet feud with Yoko began to lose its meaning in the face of this new connection. The only thing that mattered was protecting his connection with Sean. Julian realized that peace doesn't always come with grand gestures. Sometimes it's just a quiet decision to let go of the past and move forward to the future. Liberation from the Lennon name was never an easy process. Wherever Julian went, people saw his father's shadow, compared his every move to a legend he could never match. Music, his first passion, brought constant comparisons and disappointment. Critics were ruthless. He's not John. He lacks his father's talent. He's living off the family name. Every review was a reminder that the world wanted another John Lennon, not a new artist named Julian. The weight of expectations pushed him toward a radical reimagining of himself. Photography became his salvation, art where he wasn't compared to his father, where he could create his own identity. Every shot was an act of liberation, a statement of independence. Writing, personal projects, charity work all gave him a sense of purpose and identity unconnected to the Beatles. He stopped chasing approval from the music industry and began living for himself, creating art that reflected his own experience. Recent documentaries and renewed Beatles nostalgia never let him forget where he came from, but now it didn't weigh him down. Julian no longer let the past define his present. He found peace not in forgiving the past, because some things are unforgivable, but in creating a future on his own terms. He chose to honor his father's memory in his own way, through art, creativity, and quiet resilience that spoke louder than any words. The Lennon name became a legacy he carried with dignity, not a prison he tried to escape. It was a transformation that took decades but brought real freedom. Julian Lennon's journey is not a story of fairy tale forgiveness or instant healing. It's a story of pain, struggle, and ultimately accepting reality in all its complexity. The words, "I absolutely hated her," carried the weight of lost years, missed opportunities, and a family torn apart by choices none of them could undo. But through it all, Julian found a kind of peace, not complete reconciliation, but a fragile truce that allowed him to move forward. His story exposes the hidden cost of fame, the myth of perfect families, and the strength required to build a life in the shadow of a giant. If you've ever struggled with forgiveness or battled your own past, Julian's journey is a reminder that healing is possible, even if it's never perfect. It's a story about finding your voice when the world wants you to stay silent. Today, Julian Lennon is more than just the son of a legend. He's an artist, photographer, activist, and survivor. His work speaks not about who his father was, but about who he became. Every photograph, every song, every project is an act of liberation, a statement that he's more than just a footnote in Beatles history. But here's what's truly striking. The confession that shocked the world wasn't an act of revenge, but an act of liberation. By speaking the truth about his pain, Julian finally freed himself from the burden of silence that had pressed on him for decades. He showed that even in the most famous families, there are secrets, wounds, and moments of deep humanity. That behind the facade of fame and success hide real people with real feelings, who can be broken and healed just like everyone else. Julian Lennon's story is a reminder that behind every legend stand real people with real feelings. It's a story about the power of choosing your own path, even when the whole world expects you to follow in someone else's footsteps. And perhaps most importantly, it's a story about how sometimes the bravest act is simply telling the truth. Even if that truth is painful, even if it destroys illusions, even if it makes the world see its heroes in a new light. Julian Lennon finally found his voice, and that voice sounds not like an echo of his father, but like the unique melody of a man who went through hell and came out the other side, not broken, but forever changed.